sure this technology is working. So thank you for joining me today. My name is Zena Collins. I am the creator of Emotional Maths and a MSCEIT Master Trainer. So the session today is the core skills you'll need to be employable in 2030. This is really just a preview of the course that we have scheduled for January, which is looking at how we can use essentially emotional intelligence skills as our human advantage as we become more entrenched in an AI-enabled workplace. Just by way of introduction, my name's Zena, as I mentioned. I've spent 51 years being a human being. I am passionate about the creative spaces, which has also informed my practice and professional as an emotional intelligence practitioner and a transition and change management coach and architect. Spent 30 years in professional services, working with Fortune 500 companies, also spending time as a management consultant at Ernst & Young. I have trained in the Mayer, Caruso and Salovey emotional intelligence model, which is a hard ability model for looking at how do you assess your emotional intelligence skills and then look at how you apply them in practice using a methodology we've created called emotional maths. So it's one thing to understand the science, but the big challenge is the how. How do you apply that? So over the last 15 years, that's something that I've been focused on looking at. So before we start, it's always good to just get a sense of how we're feeling, how have we entered into this room? And that's one of the kind of key fundamental skills when you're thinking about emotional intelligence. So just take a moment to look at what we call our mood map. And just have a sense of where you are on that mood map in terms of colors, words, or if the matrix is easier for you to think about it, thinking about where you are in terms of energy levels, low to high, and then where you are in terms of feeling, unpleasant and pleasant. So if I was to map my self on this mood meter, I would say I actually am in a little bit of the red right now. Technology didn't work as well as I had hoped starting this conversation. And there's people that I am new to on this course. There's a bit of performance anxiety. So I would say slightly in the red, but also in the yellow as well, because I'm excited and optimistic that this is going to be a really good and valuable session for anybody who's here. So in our model, we look at emotions as data. We don't judge them as good or bad. We just look at them as data. And what is that data trying to tell us? And just with that example, you can see that sometimes you can have multiple emotions in a moment. And it's what you do with those emotions which influence the outcome. So just take a moment to think about, where are you on the mood meter? Many of you will be familiar with this gentleman, Mr. Jensen, who is essentially powering the world that we know now as the CEO of NVIDIA, which is the platform that powers a number of the AI-enabled tools that we use today. One of the key things that we are seeing is the rapid pace of technology change. So I was listening to a conversation with Mo Gardat, who used to be a leader in Google in their innovation lab, Google X. And he mentioned that AI is transforming and changing at the pace of 5.7 months. So every 5.7 months, the power of AI is essentially doubling. So our ability to navigate this space and have the skills to be employable in 6 months, in 12 months, is really critical for us to think about. And one of the things that don't change as human beings is our emotions. But one of the things many of us weren't taught at school is, how do we think about emotions in a way that they're helpful, rather than thinking about them as barriers and things that we need to suppress or block. So this number 95 is coming up a lot in conversations recently. So 95, just think about that number. If you feel comfortable putting in the chat, what does that number represent to you, 95? So that number for me, represents two things. One, there's a book by a lady called Dr. Tasha Eurich. It's called Insights, and it's about internal and external self-awareness. And in her research, it's shown that 95% of us think that we're emotionally intelligent. Sorry, not emotionally intelligent, that's a different stat. Think that we are self-aware, but actually only 10 to 15% of us are. So just think about that for a moment. Most of the time, that means we're not self-aware. There's things that are blocking our self-awareness, either internally or externally. So when we think about emotional intelligence, one of the challenges we have with emotional intelligence is there are a lot of self-reporting tests out there. And those self-reporting tests give us an opportunity to think about how emotionally intelligent we think we are. But the reality is a lot of us overestimate our emotional intelligence, and that can get us in trouble when we're trying to establish effective relationships, navigate challenging conversations, and also receiving feedback that can be uncomfortable and often triggering. The other stat that this represents is that we've seen McKinsey do a report that says that 95% of AI transformation projects are failing. And the gap that I've seen in a lot of my people and organizational change work when I was a management consultant is always the people. The people have not been equipped with the information or the tools to navigate this change or transition in this change, or understand why they should get on board to this change. And also, a lot of the times, leadership haven't really started with the end in mind in terms of what are we actually trying to solve for and transform with this. So that number is key to think about. If you are going to be of value in the workplace in the future, how do you help to solve this? How do you help to increase self-awareness in the workplace so teams can work better together? And how can you also improve people's ability to transition from the old way of working to the new way of working? So the skills that we'll be developing in this course, and what I'll be talking through in terms of some of the practical examples of that, is how ultimately we can become the 5% of people that are extremely valuable in tomorrow's workplace. So as we talked about, emotional intelligence, as we see it as a hard ability, gives you an advantage in AI. I've also heard it said that AI is actually one of the most emotionally intelligent tools that exists because it's been programmed to really understand how humans use their emotions in a way that we sometimes don't take as much care to understand because it hasn't been prioritized or positioned as something that's important. But the more we're seeing sort of polarized world that we live in, fast, rapidly changing environment, it's becoming increasingly important to be able to navigate these changes and understand the emotions that often drive that in a pragmatic and helpful way. So this model, some of you may be familiar with it, it's transition management model by William Bridges, gives us a really great picture of what's really happening. So we're coming from an ending, something's ending, a way of working, a way of being, a way of using tools is ending. And we are now shifting to a new beginning where AI is enabling everything. And it's not about whether we want to use it, it's whether we know how to use it and can use it in a way that is helpful and productive. So to be able to be valuable in the future, you need to be the human in the lead or the human in the loop that is able to navigate this landscape for yourself and for others. A lot of the times we can see lots of people getting stuck in the neutral zone. So the skills we're learning is how do you transition? Because the only constant is change. So if you think about AI doubling its capacities every 5 to 7 months, there's going to be continuous changes. So our ability to not be dysregulated emotionally and to really tune into using these emotions as a human advantage becomes one of our, I guess, superpowers, let's call it that. So let's talk through that. So this hard ability and model of emotional intelligence, it really is 4 key skills. And they're based on perceiving emotions, connecting emotions, understanding emotions, and managing emotions. So we'll get into the details of those in a little bit in this session. So I'm going to give you an exercise to think about as we go through each of these so you can see what they what these look like in real time in practice. So perceiving your emotions provide you with an early warning radar, essentially. So it's about how you perceive emotions in yourself and others by being able to see emotions in faces, body language, and also sort of the tone of what people are saying, and also the environment. So just take a moment to look at these and just very quickly think about what emotion is each of these emojis expressing. So these emojis are created by a company called FeelWise, and they have an emotional vocabulary box of 156 emotional vocabulary words that describe those emotions and give you strategies to think about those emotions intelligently. And that's one of the tools that we use in our course. So take a moment. How many of those emotions can you identify? So here's the cheat code to that. So how many of those did you get right? And just think about the different labels that other people looking at those emotions may put on those emotions. So that's what makes it confusing when you're perceiving emotions, because context matters. People's life experience, people's cultural backgrounds may inform how they read and perceive emotions in themselves and others. And so this is why we say it's helpful to not see emotions as good or bad, positive or negative, but just data. And some emotions feel more pleasant than others. So if we have 95% of us who typically are unaware or don't have self-awareness, then the ability to perceive emotions effectively and accurately becomes a superpower. And it enables you to sense friction earlier, prevent miscommunication, read subtle cues on a Zoom call. People are toning out or tuning out. I need to dial in, I need to change what's happening. And so having different tools to be able to get more data, to be able to reduce reduce your need to essentially address problems that could be fixed by perceiving emotions and addressing them earlier on becomes a really, really core skill. So noticing, naming that emotion, and then potentially numbering that in terms of, as you saw in the mood map, like how unpleasant is this and how high energy is this, and what might be appropriate for me to do as a result of feeling this emotion. So this is where the second ability comes in terms of connecting your emotions to facilitate your thinking. So it's like a cognitive acceleration, essentially. So if you're able to connect with understanding what emotions are, and often we get confused because we haven't been taught that emotions are different from feelings, feelings are different from moods. And so having clear definitions of what those are can be really helpful for us to better connect our thinking with how we use emotions. And so in situations where things are changing or you're trying to address a problem with a team, being able to cognitively accelerate your ability to think about emotions becomes another superpower. So just have a quick look at this image, which is representative of some of the research that was done about where emotions can be felt in the body. So, for example, if you're a leader in a situation and you feel that you are getting tense around the shoulders, or you're feeling heat in a particular part of your body, you may realize that something somebody has said is triggering you. And if you don't do some compensatory strategies or techniques, this frustration could turn into anger. So having the ability to connect that emotion and think about something that you can do in order to reduce the intensity of that, to better manage a meeting or better engage with someone who has a difference of opinion, becomes a really effective tool. And that takes practice. And that's why on the course, we create scenarios and situations where you can practice a number of these skills. So here you can see that the representation of these emotions in the body have been assigned to actual emotion words. So the sooner you can recognize those in your body and you've got connection to that, as I said, the sooner you can think about doing different things to take that data and use it effectively. So for example, I described the fact that I was feeling tense in my body because I could see the technology wasn't working, and I was, I had performance anxiety. I was just like, what's people going to think? They're not going to think I'm professional if I'm not doing this in a certain way. So recognizing that, I had to take a couple deep breaths, do some self-talk, and then I have a somebody who I know on the call, and just send them a message quickly just to get them to give me some tips, or give me a heads up in terms of what's working, what I might need to shift. So connecting your emotions to facilitate thinking is a real key strategy in order to work more effectively with different people, but also manage your emotions when you're going through change and using technology that at first can be really uncomfortable. So those are tactical skills, perceiving emotions and connecting emotions. But how do you then apply them strategically once you collect that data? So understanding emotions becomes key. So essentially, pattern recognition engine. This is your pattern recognition engine, recognizing the changes in emotions, recognizing how emotions can blend to create different emotions. So for example, if you have sadness and a feeling of joy, those two emotions coming together when you're thinking about something may create a sense of nostalgia. But if you see the idea of sadness as a negative thing, and don't connect that with your ability to reminisce about certain things in a I guess, helpful way, or a way that helps to inspire creativity or a sense of gratitude to situations, then there's a whole world that you're potentially blocking out by not just looking at these emotions as data. And also recognizing that, as we talked about perceiving, people's expressions on their face may be representative of the meaning that they're making of a certain situation that has nothing to do with you. It could be related to a thought that they have that has nothing to do with the conversation you're having. And so understanding the meaning of how emotions work and how moods play out and how people come to conclusions based on how they feel becomes a really helpful tool when you're building relationships. And as I talked about earlier, we are living in a more polarized world where we're going to need the ability to think diunitally, which is a phrase that Vernon J. Dixon, a professor, has used in a lot of his work. And it's really the principle of being able to see two things being true at the same time. So for example, you can be strong and kind and happy and sad all in the same moment. And also the fact that you can believe in one thing that may seem contradictory to something else, but there is a human need or there is a value system that is holding that together. So being able to think about the whole picture rather than one part is going to become increasingly important as we rely on technology to do the basic function work, where we have to then start to use our cognitive abilities and our emotional intelligence to navigate the nuances that come up in our day-to-day lives. So understanding how emotions work means that leaning into our ability to be curious and recognizing what's triggering these emotions in ourselves or triggering these emotions in others, and being able to have a wide vocabulary so we can stay curious rather than judgmental and develop strategies to create spaces that are psychologically safe, where people can disagree or people can innovate and learn new things in a way that doesn't make them feel vulnerable and cause them to check out. The workplace is going to become increasingly messy, fast, and constantly changing. So being able to be in a situation where you recognize that certain people's emotions, where even if you don't understand them, may be coming from a meaning, a sense of pride, and a sense of ownership or loss that they're experiencing, and being able to ask questions in a way that is curious, compassionate, and empathetic will be the difference between teams being able to form and perform or teams staying in the storming phase. So bringing this all together. So a lot of the times I did an interview recently with the pioneers in emotional intelligence, Dr. Jack John Mayer, Dr. Peter Salovey, and Dr. David Caruso, who will be one of the people that will be working with me on the courses that we deliver in January. And one of the things that they hope for the future of this science around emotional intelligence is our ability to teach people the how. And that's why we're creating this incubator where people can actually practice these skills. So how do you, once you understand perceiving emotions, connecting emotions, and understanding emotions, how do you manage emotions in yourself and others? And the reason why we call it a hard ability is because it's extremely hard to do when you're in pressurized situations or you get triggered when somebody says something that disrupts your values or impacts something that is related to the things that you need in life to feel secure and safe. So managing emotions and knowing how to manage emotions in yourself and where appropriate others is key to being able to create stable environments where you can also influence people. So we're having to learn a whole new ABCs, and those ABCs we call accountability, bandwidth, capacity, and competency. And this is for creating healthy, psychologically, emotional, intelligent spaces where people feel empowered, safe, respected, supported, acknowledged, and connected. Becoming a species who has the bandwidth to navigate the nuances and the complexities of life and different opinions that we find ourselves navigating. And then the skills, like developing the skills and capacities and competencies to, in some ways, sometimes look at how things worked before and realize that we've got to create a whole new workflow based on the tools that we have and what AI enables us to do. So as I talked previously, and I'm going to send you a link after this where you can do a really, it should be a fun quiz to assess your own emotional intelligence skills using what we call our emotional maths sums approach. So maths sums, it helps you to do your sums with emotions. A lot of the emotional intelligence self-reporting tests, which are really more social emotional trait tests rather than emotionally intelligent tests, if I can get the words out, they really focus on looking at personality traits. So how positive are you? How agreeable are you? And they're based on the Neo Big Five traits, which are also really helpful because the more agreeable you are, the more likelihood you are to be able to get on in situations with people that you don't always share the same opinion with. And so they are helpful. But when you're trying to assess your emotional intelligence abilities, as we discovered, if 95% of us aren't as self-aware as we think we are, we're going to typically overestimate or potentially underestimate those. So think about this. We're always going through some type of transition, and change is constant, as we mentioned. And typically people get trapped in the neutral zone, or they may grab onto an ending where it's too scary to think about this new beginning. So they're in these unpleasant emotions, and that has an impact on people's ability to perform. And so as we talked about in terms of doing your ABCs, being able to give people the science behind how emotions work, and then giving them the capabilities and competencies to know how to navigate that, and creating blueprints for themselves based on their backgrounds, based on their experience, is going to be so key to them being able to be of value in the workplace in the future. So I'm going to pause there just to see if there were any questions or thoughts that came up. But the course that we're doing, as I mentioned, will include myself, Amal Williams, who is an expert in AI and has written a book called Coded Conscience, which tackles the ethics around AI, and Dr. David Caruso, who is one of the creators of the MSCEIT test. But happy to take any questions that you have. Just take a moment just to check in, like, how do you feel about all this information that's shared? Where are you on the mood meter? What are your numbers? This has been fast paced because it is 30 minutes. And as they say, it's a lightning lesson. So we've gone through this really rapidly, but please feel free to reach out to me. I will put my details on the screen, as you'll see, with a QR code where you can reach out to me and we can talk about any areas that you need clarity on. So there again, there's my QR code if you want to book a discovery call, and then there's a 20% promotion code for anybody that attends the lightning sessions or listens to the replay. So welcome from New York and welcome from the Netherlands. So I'll just take a moment to see if there's any questions. If not, I thank you for joining, and hope to see you on the course in January.